Michael here, and in this video journal I'll be working on the bindings. I'll cut the binding channel around the top and around the back, install the bindings, and then carve down the arm bevel and install the arm bevel veneer. Keep watching. I have both bodies sanded down all the way around, and it's time to start working on the binding process. First thing I want to do is put a wash coat of shellac on the bodies. And before I do that though, I want to go ahead and protect my insides. So I'm going to take a little plastic top to a beam dip and push it right over my sound port hole and secure it in place with just a piece of foam. And always save your tops to your peanut cans. Stick that right down, the piece of foam down into your sound hole, and then just press that in place. The foam will hold it up there, and then the other one here. So I've got my sound holes and my sound port ready. The grain really starts to come out when you put something on it like this. One of the reasons for the wash coat of shellac is that when I do the binding channels, when I cut the binding channels, there'll be fresh wood where I've cut the binding channel, which I'm going to use obviously to glue the bindings on. But any glue squeeze out or that comes across the top will be less likely to be hard to clean up because I've sealed that area with this wash coat of shellac. Also, if I use any kind of tape, which I do use when I do my binding, and when I use tape to do my binding and I tape over the sides, then the wash coat of shellac helps to not have grain tear out when I take all that off. Okay, I started with the back first. The shellac flashes off real quick, dries real quick, so that I can lay it on the back to do the top. I'm going to do something differently on the top. I'm not going to use my little pads. And one of the reasons is that I have some light colored wood here around my rosette, that maple, and the alcohol and the shellac will make these rosewood areas here, these darker woods, bleed all over everything else, and I don't want that to happen. So what I'm going to do is actually use some spray shellac. Now that I have both bodies sanded down and a wash coat of shellac put on them, it's time to start working on the binding. The first part of the binding is going to be putting a binding strip here where the arm bevel is going to be. So I've gone and taken my arm bevel guide and extended the line all the way up to the sides so I know where the arm bevel starts. And I've placed a template on here that I've made previously and just penciled in the location of that arm bevel binding. So I have a couple of strips of the binding that I'm going to be using on this build. Unfortunately though, they're not quite the right shape. So I'm going to have to bend them just a little bit so they'll fit that curve. And I've got my little electric bending iron here. And I'm just going to take this little piece of binding on this electric bending iron and just kind of mold it to the proper shape. There we go, that'll work. This strip of binding that I'm going to use for my arm bevel block binding is really way too thick. I don't need that much of it inlaid in there. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take this piece of binding and I'm going to cut it in half. So I need to draw a little line down the middle of that so that I can take it over to my scroll saw and cut it off. So I'm going to take this washer here, it's clamped to the bench, and my trusty blue pencil, and just mark it. And that's giving me a center line. I have my binding strip cut and bent to the proper thickness and radius now. And it's time to go ahead and route out the channel for it. Well, I've got my router template guide on the top for clamp down. And my bit is 5/16 of an inch. The center of it is in from the guide. So I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that my pencil line is 5/16 of an inch at each end. All right, there is our channel cut. Well, that's the first part of the binding process done. Glue that in. And it's time to go ahead and glue it in. I've done a test fit and everything seems to be just fine. And just go ahead and put some glue in there. And this is just a little piece of cut off guitar string that I'm going to use to kind of spread that glue around in there. Just to make sure I've got everything good and tight down in there, I'm going to use a little clamp just to kind of put a little squeeze pressure on there. Alrighty. Now that I have both of the bodies with the binding strip for where the arm bevel block is going to be installed, it's time to start routing out the channel for the binding all the way around. I've got one of my bodies mounted on the work sled on my router table, and I'm going to go ahead and do the binding. I've already made a test cut in a piece of mahogany to make sure that I've gotten the binding channel cut to the appropriate thickness. And just like when I was doing the trimming on the tops, we're going to start this process by doing climb cuts. Well, there's the first cut on the back, our strip of binding here. Okay. Now I have to do the top and then the other body. I have repositioned the body on my sled so that I can route out the top. And once again, I'll start with the climb cuts. And I have to be careful when I get over here to my arm bevel block area because I don't want to route into this area because the bottom of the router may damage the sides that are cut out into there. the binding channels routed out on this body, the top and the back. And now I'm going to switch over and do the other body. And then we'll get to gluing the bindings on. I'm ready to start gluing the binding on, and I've taken some strips of binding and I have trimmed them to where they're going to fit on here. And I've beveled the bottom side of the binding where it tucks up in just a little bit, taking that sharp edge off. And I'm going to go ahead and start gluing these on. I'm going to start with these shorter strips on the outside and then the longer strip on the other side, and we'll go from there. Once again, I'm using just a regular wood glue that dries transparent. And I'm just going to use this little brush to kind of spread that glue out a little bit. Strip down here. All right, now our long strip. I'll start using my band clamp. And I'll start in the middle. Okay. Okay, I've got that top part of this body, the binding glued on. Let that dry. I've removed all the clamp banding, and this body has been bound all the way around on both sides. The next step will be to start working on the arm bevel block, carving it down till it's flush, and then I'll install the arm bevel veneer. Now that I have the body bound all the way around, top, bottom, and the arm bevel binding installed, it's time to start carving this portion of the arm bevel away so that I can have a nice flat transition here, and so I can glue on the arm bevel overlay. So I'm just going to take some planes and start trimming this down. Now you can start to see the bevel angle that I'm creating here. I'm just going to keep going until I get that angle going from this section of the sides all the way up to the very edge of my binding. I've sanded down the arm bevel till it's smooth from edge to edge, and I have gone right up to the edge of the black veneer on the binding. So I've gotten this ready for the next step, and the next step is going to be to trim the arm bevel veneer so that I can glue it on. And I need to kind of get a template of that. So Dulcie's going to sit here and supervise this entire process. I'm going to take the piece of paper that I've done that and just draw an oversized line on it. So here's my template for my arm bevel veneer, just slightly oversized. And with a little blue pencil, just kind of mark the outline. Okay. And I'm just going to take this over to my scroll saw and trim that out. Okay. Here's my arm bevel veneer ready to glue on. I just need to first apply glue to both surfaces and then let it dry. Okay, I've got a nice even coat of glue on both surfaces, and I'm going to let that dry. Well, my glue has dried on the arm bevel and on the arm bevel veneer, and so it's time to go ahead and glue these together. So what I'm going to do is, using a veneer iron, I'm going to place my veneer where it needs to be, and then simply iron it in place. And I'm going to just take a couple of pieces of tape on the ends here. Well, the arm bevel veneer has dried, and the next step is going to be to put some super glue right along the joint here and here, just to kind of seal those areas before I start trimming. So I have a little pipette with some super glue in it, and I'm just going to lay it right down here. Well, the arm bevel veneer has been on long enough for it to dry, and it's time to trim it down. And to trim it, I'm just going to take a piece of thin cardboard here that I've cut to match the profile of the bevel. I've just got a fresh box blade, razor blade, with a little piece of rubber double stick tape to it as a handle. And a little small piece of wood that I'm just going to use as a backing board. And I'm just going to simply come over here and trim this down. Now that I got the majority of my bevel veneer trimmed off, I can just do the rest of it just by sanding down on the top part here anyway. Now for the sides, I do have a little bit of an overhang here, and not so much here, but basically I'll just sand the sides down rather than trying to cut them. Okay, I've gotten the arm bevel veneers sanded down, and looks like that'll work. Next step is just going to be final sanding the body, getting the binding flush with the sides all the way around, and then just making sure that the body's ready for this next step, which will be its final wash coat of shellac. Then we'll put it to the side and start working on necks. Well, that concludes this video journal on the bindings. Bindings are installed, the arm bevel veneer is on, final sand the body, and we'll be ready for the next stage in the build. If you enjoy my video content and have received some benefit from it, please let me know, and also consider supporting the channel. There's a link below. Thanks so much for watching.